caused me to caused both my wife and I's concern. We had guests over one night. We were sitting out in our sunroom, we call it, the doors open and everything, and all of a sudden there were planes coming over during the time that the third runway was being utilized for the incoming traffic. Most of them were traveling north. Most of the planes were going north at this particular time in summer. And all of a sudden, well, there's an effect. After the plane goes by, maybe 20 to 30 seconds later, there's a real high wind that occurs. Yeah. And on this particular, it knocked over my wife and ground. And another time we're out, we're going out gardening. Same thing happened. Blew my hat right off my head, and lifted up leaves and grass and stuff like that on the ground. And I thought, man, should we have to put up with that kind of disturbance from an airplane coming into the airport?
Get next to the microphone.
We used to hear it better, John. Speak up.
So I need to know what controls are in place to control the altitude of these planes. It seems to me that you come in a little higher, drop a little faster. But they came in right over our house. British Airways, by the way, is a big offender. I forget anything that only have trees being moved or something.
Normally what happens when it comes to the airport is several miles out, I don't know, 10 miles out or so, they're intercepting what they call the wide slope into the airport. It's normally a 3-degree descent right into the runway. That's under a typical ILS. It's a very controlled. Some vary a little bit, especially when you're in VFR tracking, but just about every aircraft is right on that 3-degree descent. You want to jump in on that a little bit?
Well, my question would be, I don't know this off the top of my head, how far south is 216th, you said?
Right at Des Moines Post Office, down the hill.
Miles?
5
The
miles.
library, miles 216th, minus 180th, or whatever the street there, but I'm not. I don't know, miles, probably.
2 miles south of touchdown.
They have to get down the land. I know you didn't want to hear that, but they do have to get down the land. When you're about 5 miles out, I would imagine they'd be somewhere in the area of 2,000 feet.
I guess, I don't really know.
Let me explain what the phenomenon is that you're experiencing about aircraft when they come in are generating what we call wingtip vortices, small, if you will, cylinders of air that come off the trailing edge of the wings. The heavier the aircraft is, the larger that wingtip vortice is. So it makes sense that you're noticing it on heavies. I think you said the British Airways flights. They will generate a bigger wingtip vortice than like an MD-80 will. The wingtip vortice actually has some, for lack of a better word, some properties to it that it actually settles with gravity. And you'll hear rustling on the ground from time to time when it comes out. The heavier the aircraft, the bigger the vortice is. And that's undoubtedly what you're experiencing. I can't address the question whether or not it does dissipate as it drops too. I mean, it generates those vortices at cruise as well. But obviously, when it's cruising at 35,000 feet, you know, it dissipates shortly thereafter, so it never reaches the ground. As it gets,
It has the effect of a dust devil.
Yes.
The action.
Told you so. The port's projections were ridiculously wrong. The port's projections to justify the third runway were ridiculously wrong. Okay, so now you've built it. So I look at this and I have two questions about this. We were indeed told this would be used in bad weather. We were not told that it would be used when it was crowded. So my first question about the crowding is, what hours is it crowded and what percentage of the day is it crowded in your estimation such that you have to use the third runway?
I mean, it really depends on the demand of those aircraft coming in, what schedule is there. You can generally see an arrival demand coming in the morning, noon, and evening hours, and just have the same thing with the departure demand. That just depends on you as the airline passengers, where you buy that ticket and where that demand for that flight goes.
Well, that leads me to my second question. Who controls that? Who tells United Airlines you can take off one flight or 27 flights a day? Is it the FAA or is it the port?
It's not the port, I guarantee you that. That would more than likely be the airline making the schedule, and then they report that to the FAA as a flight, and they schedule the flight plan, and then if there's delays coming out of another airport, they go up to the ground.
Well, surely someone has to coordinate. Delta gets this many flights a day, United gets that many flights a day. Who does that?
It's the airlines, it's the demands of that airline, it's the demand of the passengers put on.
So United just says to you, well, port, we're going to land 30 planes a day, take it or leave it?
They don't say, well, port, they just say, well, FAA, we're going to
It's the marketplace that generates the demand for.
I understand that.
And-
That's not my question.
Well, sir, if you let me continue, please. It reaches a point, and I don't know, I'm not that familiar with the Sea-Tac operations, but at airports in general, it reaches a point where the overcrowding of the schedule like that ends up hurting the market demand because people decide they're not going to fly anymore from that airport because the time delays have gone to a point where it just doesn't pay anymore. But there is no, unless there's some safety implication, there is no FAA oversight saying you can or cannot fly during that time.
Okay. My second question, I'll start again with an observation. It is sometimes told as a joke that if you have 1 foot in the freezer and 1 foot in the fireplace, you're comfortable. When you talk about averages, and when this woman here was saying she's got 100 decibel spikes, and you said, oh, but half the time they're flying the other way, so half the time she's at 100 and half the time she's at 0, and therefore she's at 50 and you won't do anything for her. I understand that the port doesn't control the FAA, but I am very skeptical of the implication in what you said that the port is prohibited by federal law from doing something about this problem. And what I don't understand, and maybe you can tell me, is why the port doesn't do something that's more realistic than looking at averages when the averages are basically garbage.
Studying this and understanding this with acoustical engineers throughout the United States, the FAA have picked the DNL noise metric as the one that fit the best for airport noise for the mitigation projects that directly relate to the disturbance and the amount of disturbance that happen within those contours for the noise annoyance. Really, it's not the Port of Seattle saying it's the best metric, or even some of the best acoustical consultants in the world say maybe it's not the best metric. We don't say that. We're saying it is the metric that we are required to use. If the Port of Seattle were to go out and try to do mitigation, we have one option, which is the tax levy. We don't have enough committed with that tax levy, and I shouldn't even say that. I'm not real sure how much we have committed with tax levy and all the Seaport programs, but the only tax levy money we use at the airport is for the Highline School District and the mitigation on that.
Okay, my last observation, then I'll sit down. Anybody who's listened to late night television, and when the commercial comes on, it blasts you, big spike. Anyone who's done that, and we probably all have that experience, knows it's not the average, it's the spikes that's important. So once again, if only once a night I get woken up, I get woken up every night.
I understand it's worse close in, but to use a single event to try and do mitigation programs off of that is just not feasible for us to even determine the magnitude of what that would
It's not a single event.
It's every night.
It happens all the
be.
time.
Today, no doubt.
That's why we're
Okay,
kind